Here we go, part 6, finally the last part. I know you guys have been anxiously waiting to get done this part of the notes. I cannot tell a lie. I hope I can get through this in 15 minutes. There's a lot of stuff, so let's get to it. I know you're as excited as I am about federalism. Yay, federalism. So, how about a whole bunch of notes? There's a whole bunch of different types of federalism out there. I touched on federalism last time. It's a division of power between different levels of government. In this case, we've got a national government, state government, and local governments. And lucky for us, if you look at the very top part here in black, it says that there are 267 different definitions of federalism out there. You don't have to know all of them. Yay! You have to know a lot of them. Boo! Nobody likes that. So let's get to the major ones here, the ones that you need to know about. There's cooperative federalism, marble cake federalism. No, I did not make that up. Please stop thinking, oh, Mr. Lugo's chubby. He likes cake, so he made one up for himself. No, no, not at all. It's actually the federalism we use. And then there's something that's referred to in our government as new federalism, which you saw under Presidents Nixon, Reagan, and the first Bush, H.W. Bush. So there, you can read for yourself. I'm not going to read them to you, but know that for us, cooperative federalism and marble cake federalism, basically the same thing. And these are the two we're going to work on. If you had to describe our system of federalism, I'd definitely go with a marble cake type of definition, where you have federalism just kind of national government and state governments kind of mixed together, just like cake. Cake. So, which ones do you really have to concern yourself with? Dual federalism, under which states and national government each remain supreme within their own spheres. Notice that part's in italics there. That means that they all have their responsibilities and they shouldn't touch each other. They have their own little thing going on. That's fine and great, and that's actually the ideal situation of the Constitution. Nothing ever works out the way we plan. For us, the cooperative federalism and the marble cake federalism is a much better definition. The one in the middle here that says fiscal federalism, the pattern of spending and taxing, providing grants, that relationship between the states and national government is where we've moved our federalism to here in the United States. If you take a look down by the arrow, American federalism is portrayed as a system with mingled responsibilities and blurred distinctions. That's why cooperative federalism doesn't work well. That's why you want to use marble cake to describe the federalism system that we use here in the United States. So, overall, when it comes to federalism, what you're really talking about is intergovernmental relations. That doesn't sound good at all. Intergovernmental relations. Wow. I don't know what I was thinking when I typed that up. I think it's from your book. Anyway, again, with the dual federalism, the cooperative federalism, the big thing is down here by the arrow and underlined. The standard operating procedures of cooperative federalism, where you have a sharing of costs, a sharing of guidelines, a sharing of administration. This is what you really want to think of when you come to the federalism system that exists in the United States. We have a system where there's a lot of sharing back and forth. As much as we want to have this dual federalism, which is kind of where we started our government system, as you'll see a little later, you'll see in the Supreme Court cases, the reality of the situation is you find us more in this cooperative federalism and this marble cake federalism where there's these blurred lines. Things don't seem to be very distinct. Case in point, and you'll see when we get to fiscal federalism and a little more marble cake definition, is the big dig up in Boston, or as they say in Boston, Baston. I don't know why. I'm not a big Boston fan. Go Yankees. So, something that's come up over the years is something called devolution. Devolution is this transferring of power back to the states. We really saw this under some conservative presidents like Reagan, Bush #1, even Bush #2, where the responsibility of things like education and the welfare of the people within a state is that responsibility is transferred back to the states and the local government and taken out of the national government's hands. This is the major difference when we talk about the two major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. This idea of devolution, where Republicans are going to want to give states more freedom, and Democrats are going to want the national government to do more, which is really what we see. This is a modern issue. You see the current president of the United States, Barack Obama, who got pushed forward the Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. This idea of the national government taking care of the people on such a small level, all the way down to the state level, this is really where you see that difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans want devolution to happen. So let's move over to fiscal federalism, which is where we see a lot of federalism taking place. And this is why we have some blurred lines. No, it's not a plug for the silly little song that's out there now. But this is where we do find some mixing of the lines between the national government and the state governments and the local governments. Fiscal federalism is that pattern of spending, taxing, and providing grants. What you may not know is that the federal grants have grown tremendously over the last, I'd say, about 10 years or so. The federal government puts out more than $600 billion a year in grants. You can see at the bottom in blue with the bottom arrow, it says grants increase in 2010 and 11 due to the stimulus package. This is where President Obama takes over and tries to get the economy jump-started. And in order to jump-start that economy, he throws out money from the federal government to get the economy going. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as we move forward. And this is just an estimate. This is actually in your book in Chapter 3. It's Figure 3.1 about fiscal federalism and the increase in federal grants to the state and local governments. And you can see the tremendous amount that's forecasted there on the far right side, what we should be seeing as we move towards our time. We don't have any graphs that show actual data. So a small issue with federalism. Federalism and how it's evolved over time in our government has definitely caused problems between the state and federal government. But this was an issue at the onset of the Constitution. You had federalists, you had anti-federalists. So one big thing to point out here, the Supremacy Clause, which comes from Article 6 of the Constitution, says that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. You can see that in red in italics right down here. What Article 6 does is it states that there are three items that the national government reigns supreme. The state governments have to fall in line. And they're stated in this order as well. Number one, the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. Laws of the national government are superior to the laws of the state government and take precedent over the state government laws. So if there's a state law that conflicts with a national law, is what's being said here is any state law that conflicts with the national law, the state law goes bye-bye. National law is the winner here. And then finally, treaties. Only the national government can make treaties with other nations in the first place. So any treaty that gets made, if there's a state law that's in conflict with the treaty, the state law goes bye-bye. And this is part of federalism because it's the working relationship of the national government and the state governments here. Don't forget that. As we move forward, we can actually see these issues grow. You have Article 6 that has the Supremacy Clause in it, but the framers of the Constitution don't help themselves later on. There's a huge question of where the national government ends and where the state government begins when you add the Bill of Rights. The 10th Amendment says makes a very broad statement that powers not delegated to the national government by the Constitution and aren't prohibited to it or the states are reserved for the states. And what that's saying is that if it's not spelled out in the Constitution for the national government to have the power or the state government to have the power, and if it's not expressly written in the Constitution that the national government can't do something or the state government can't do something, then those powers are supposed to go to the state government. But this idea of federalism and that the Constitution, the national government, are the supreme law of the land, really put these two things in conflict with one another and really causes a problem for our government system. You can see here, this is also from Chapter 3, a nice little chart that shows in the left-hand column, these are powers granted to the national government. In the center column, you have powers that are both national and state government. And then in the right-hand column, you have things that apply strictly to the states. The dark blue is powers granted, the light blue, powers denied. So you should be familiar with a lot of these things. Big here, both of them have the power to tax and borrow money, and both have the power to establish courts. This becomes a problem as we move forward. You can see here they have the ability, both have the ability to charter banks and corporations, spend money for general welfare. It's this part right here that causes the blurring on who has what power. So let's talk a little bit about how the national government got to where it is. The national government has things called expressed or enumerated powers. These are the powers that are written into the Constitution. So if I back up a slide, that would be these powers right here. These are going to be your enumerated or expressed powers of the national government. However, in 1819, you're going to have a big Supreme Court case, and one of the greatest Supreme Court Chief Justices, John Marshall, is presiding over the Supreme Court at this time. You're going to have a big Supreme Court case, 1819, McCulloch versus Maryland. And here, Marshall states that the national government has something called implied powers. These are powers that are kind of like in between the lines. If the government has the ability to charter banks, the national government, then it also has to have the ability to regulate the banking system. Even though it's not written into the Constitution, it's implied. One of these implied powers comes out a little bit later when it comes to Gibbons versus Ogden in 1824, and you see the national government extending its power of commerce. Of course, you can really see the national government establish its authority over the states when it comes to the Civil War, which you're all familiar with, and the southern states try to secede from the Union, while the national government of the United States, which is adhering to the Constitution, says you can't do that, and all of a sudden there's war. Something a little less violent would be Brown versus Board of Education, of which there are actually two Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court cases. Here you have the national government forcing to end segregation in public school systems, where education is supposed to be the responsibility of a state government. The national government is coming through and forcing the state governments to integrate their school systems. This is part of the struggle between the state power and the national government power. Here you can see a great picture. I keep this picture in here because of this man. This is Governor George Wallace. He'll later be shot. He was a racist and a half, and then it turns out black people love him after he gets shot. It's very weird. You should really take a look at that history. But back to fiscal federalism, I'm actually going to stop part 6 here. You can read what's here, and I'm going to pick up right here. I'm going to put an addendum to part 6 online a little later on this evening because we're running out of time. But for right now, guys, we're at federalism. We're almost done federalism. You can go back and play the notes, and you can hear my wonderful, wonderful voice because I know you miss me. And that's it for right now. This is Mr. Lugo signing on.